Hey everybody, so I'm going to be doing a mini review, well I guess a full-on review of the MyTflux. And I've shown this quite a bit on my channel. It is a product that is sold, I think, exclusively through Rio Grande, considering that their label is on it and I haven't found it elsewhere. And this is a flowing agent for solder. Now, I have used both the MyTflux and the Firescoff, which to me is kind of similar. That's why I purchased this, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So I wrote down a couple of notes just to kind of keep me on track, not so much on track, but at least to go over all the things that I kind of noted about using the product as I've used it. Now, everyone's going to have a different experience. Some people love this stuff. Some people hate this stuff. You might like it, you might not. I'm just going to give you kind of my opinion and take it for what it is in a grain of salt. So, let's get started. Now, the reason that I purchased this product was because I really like my metal to be protected, and a lot of times paste flux only goes so far. Paste flux is kind of known as beginner's flux, but I like paste flux a lot. I still like it. I still use it primarily most of the time when I do solder, but I wanted something that's going to protect the metal. Paste flux will only go so far with actually protecting the metal and creating kind of a barrier to allow not to overheat the piece, and also so that fire stain and fire scale don't build up as much. So fire stain and fire scale are two different things. Fire scale is kind of like that black coating and, you know, the dirtiness that it gets, or I should say, how it gets dirty when you do apply heat to the metal. Now, fire stain is when you actually overheat the metal and the silver raises out of the copper and you're left with that reddish tint when you go to your final polishing stages. And that's something that we all want to avoid. It's a big pain in the ass and it makes our lives harder. So, I bought the MyTflux for that. Originally, I bought Firescoff. Now, this is what Firescoff looks like. And this is MyTflux in the Firescoff bottle. That's because I've gone through about 4 or 5 bottles of the Firescoff before I ever tried the MyTflux. And while I did like this, it's pretty expensive. I will put the amount that it costs on the screen somewhere. And I just wanted to find an alternative that was a little bit cheaper and I use less of. Now, this is a fire scale preventer, flux, and heat shield. Whereas the MyTflux is not necessarily marketed towards a heat shield or anything like that. Well, I think it does, you know, say it's a heat shield, but it doesn't say it on the bottle necessarily. This is a self-pickling flux for gold and silver. So I think a lot of goldsmiths like this for maybe a bit more protection with your work, but I do mostly silver, as you guys know. I bought the 1 pint version of this. You can buy it in a couple of different sizes. I think there might be a smaller one and a larger one. I will put all the information on the screen and I will link it below. So they describe this on the website as a self-pickling flux. It's good for hard soldering and high temperature soldering, but it's also good for all soldering. You can use it on easy, you can use it on extra easy, it doesn't really matter. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I did write down some notes, so if I look down, it's just so I can remember kind of where I want to go with this video. There's a few things I really like about this flux, and there's a few things I really don't like about it. One is I like it for annealing. So when I want to anneal like ring shanks or do any type of ring forming, as you know, the thicker the metal, it tends to be a bit harder to form and shape around your mandrels because it needs to be annealed. So when you do like annealing and then soldering the ring shank closed and then soldering it to a back plate, that's a lot of heat. There's more likeliness of you getting that fire stain or a lot of fire scale. And this is something that's nice that kind of prevents that. So I like it for annealing in the fact that it will protect the metal. It's very easy. You can just spray it on or you can dip the piece in the solution. You would heat the metal first, then apply it, and you'll see it kind of gets like a white coating on top of the ring. I'll show you a clip inserted or on the side. And then after you would continue to heat it, that little white layer will burn off. It's being protected at that point, and then you would, you know, start to heat it more until it's annealed, and then you would pickle. You're not supposed to pickle, not that you're not supposed to, but it says it's self-pickling. I still pickle it. It definitely does not get anywhere near as dirty as using a paste flux and having to pickle after. You could get away with not pickling. I pickle anyways. I find that the metal's still a little dirty, so not too bad. Definitely an improvement from regular flux. So for the annealing process, it definitely gives protection if you're going to continue to solder that piece. I feel like it just lowers your chances of getting any fire stain. Okay, so right now I'm going to show you the process that I would do
for annealing when I'm working with, let's just say, something like a flat band that I want to anneal to get a little bit softer to form. And then I'm just going to show you this piece. It's already formed and actually soldered, but it's a scrap piece because there's some markings in it. I just want to show you how I would dip it. So you can spray it and dip it. I'll spray this piece and dip this one. This is probably one of my favorite uses for this, is just the overall protection. Now, I do like it for soldering, so it's more or less just like a little bit of a different feel than using your traditional paste flux. I started my torch. What I like to do is I apply a bit of heat to the piece that I want to anneal to kind of get it prepped so that this way the spray will really adhere to it. It needs to be heated up a little bit and I'll get that nice white coating that we're after. So as you can see, now it's nice and white. Let me see if I can zoom in a bit. There we go. So what you'd want to do is you would want to burn that white layer off, that protective coating. I normally also would probably turn this over. See how that's not protected and it's a bit black? If I turned it over a bit sooner, that coating would really do its job in protecting it so it doesn't get any of that fire scale. So essentially what I was talking about, either, I don't know when I'm going to insert this clip, is before or after. You have to burn that layer off before you'd really start to reach temperatures for solder flow. If you didn't put this on, it would obviously reach annealing temperature or flow temp much quicker. So at this point, this is nice and ready. And as you can see, the metal is relatively clean. It would need minimal pickling at this point because it really is a self-pickling product. But let's just show you if we wanted to dip it. So obviously, if you have, like I said at some point in this video, something that requires multiple solders, this method wouldn't be really too appropriate dipping, at least in my opinion. So now I would dip. See? You dip the piece and it coats it all around, which is nice, it's convenient, and much quicker. And you would just keep on going like we did with the first piece with the annealing process, or if you were in the soldering process. It's basically the same thing for both. You would obviously just be waiting for solder to flow at this point if you were going to be using this for soldering and not annealing. But you can really tell that the metal is much cleaner than it would be without it. So let's just show you a piece of silver, some scrap silver I have. If we were to heat this, whether it be, like I said, for soldering or annealing, so as you can see, the piece gets much dirtier. So this is really a fantastic product for protection if that's what you're looking for.
So I guess to touch upon a point I just said, because it protects so well, I guess a benefit and a con at the same time maybe is that you need to apply twice the amount of heat. Not that you have to apply twice the amount of heat, because once you burn through that protective layer, then you're going to start doing your annealing or soldering, and you're going to actually get your results after. Meaning, normally if you don't apply a product like this to the piece, you're just going to be straight up applying the amount of heat that it needs. So if it needs to reach 1460 to flow, that's all you have to go to, and then your torch is on half the amount of time. If you're using something like this, you're going to have the torch on just a little bit more time. So you do use more gas, and you do actually have to be soldering that particular piece a little bit longer, or more or less applying heat for a little longer, because you have to burn through that protective barrier. But it's a good thing because, like I said, it actually protects the metal. So you can kind of say that's good and bad. So a couple of things I'm not really fond of with this. I don't really love this for, I'm really into this product more for protection as opposed to soldering. I don't really care for it when I'm trying to solder a bezel seam, because most of the time I'm working with fine silver, which is almost pure silver, and it needs a lot less protection. So I do prefer paste with my bezel seams, but this does work fine if you wanted to use it. Also, it's a liquid, so I feel like I don't need to really dip it or overspray a product for the smallest of bezel seams. I just think it's kind of a waste. So also, soldering bezels to back plates, I'm not really too fond of this product as well for it, because I find that it's not as smooth and buttery, and it creates a little bit more of like like bubbles and gaps. And trust me, there's no air pockets between the two spaces. I find this happens with either back plates to ring shanks or back plates to bezel seams when I'm soldering. I just find that paste flux, for me, I get a really smooth, consistent flowing point. So let's say I have a piece of solder. I'm going to actually show probably a clip because it'll be easier. But if I have a piece of solder that's ready to flow, it flows around really nicely and really smooth one shot with the flux, the paste flux. When I use the MyTflux, I just find it's not as smooth, and that's just an observation I've made.
Okay, so let's say we want to do a back plate at this point. It really is all virtually the same process to do this with the MyTflux. I'm going to be taking some medium solder as we would with any second solder step. And like I said, it's not really much different than the annealing process. I mean, it's not like it says you should use this product for annealing. That's what I like to use it for. So I'm going to heat this up, and I'm actually going to dip both of these pieces. I find that it's probably going to be easiest since they are pretty small anyways. There we go. Nice white coating. I'm going to dip that, then we're going to dip this. So now I attach the pieces. You can also spray this on if you prefer. Whatever you want to do, it doesn't really matter. I'm just showing you both ways. So what I find funny is that the flame actually reacts a bit different with the temperature. When you do spray this, it turns a little bit different of colors. And I just knocked the bezel off. Alright, put it back on. So the flame tends to burn different colors. Now this is where I'm not a huge fan of this product. Not that it doesn't work, it's just I prefer the way that the paste flows overall, and just how the metal, I don't know, looks. I don't know what it is. I really couldn't explain it. It's just a preference thing. So here it goes. Now it's flowing all the way around. So it'd be really hard for you to tell on camera the differences between paste and this. Like I said, obviously the metal I do feel like gets a whole lot less fire scale with this particular product, but I don't really find that fire scale seems to be an issue. I mean, I just pop it in the pickle and that's the end of that. If you were able to look up close, you could really see the differences. To me, it's just not as smooth of a flow. It would be really hard to tell on camera, I feel, but it still gets the job done.
Same thing when it comes to attaching a ring shank to a back plate. I'm just more fond of my paste flux. I find that I just get a really nice, even flow. Another thing is like these products, these spray type, dipping type products are very easy to waste because you're spraying. Now you can dip, but think about it this way. Let's say you're trying to do your ring shank to a back plate. It takes more time for me to heat, dip, and then set it up, and then have to go about soldering, than to just apply a little paste flux and just solder in one shot. Now, you could then spray it instead of dipping it, because dipping it's a little bit harder if you have a multiple solder that you need third hands for. You would have to do all of your dipping prior to setting it up, or you can use the spray method, which to me wastes a lot. So you definitely use a lot of product, but for the benefits such as protecting the metal, it can be worth it. It's really a matter of technique and if you feel comfortable and like the way that this solders. I don't think it's really a right or wrong way. It's more or less of what you're used to and what you prefer. So I'm not really fond, like I said, of using this for necessarily the flowing of solder. It's more or less the protection in the soldering process. So I do like it though for when I'm doing a lot of like 14 gauge stacking rings. I find it very easy to just heat all the stacking rings up at once on my charcoal block, spray the flux. I usually turn it over and spray the other side, and it really, I find that the seams do solder very nicely with that because they're so much thinner than some of the other ring shanks that I use. The solder really just flows a lot quicker and it's just easier and I can just do it all at once. Other ring shanks I'm not as fond of. I just find, like I said, the paste really gets me a really nice seamless flow.
Okay, so now I have these two pieces. These are little rope bezels that I'm going to be putting, well, these are just rope wires that I'm going to be putting around bezels. And I would normally probably use paste flux for something like this, but I'm going to show you if I wanted to use the MyTflux, how to do so. It really is a great product. I don't know if I'm conveying that enough in the video because I've already edited most of the video. But it's really a pretty stellar choice for certain applications. I've repeated myself with that particular line a few times, so I do apologize in advance. I'm editing and cracking up. There's certain people that are going to like using this maybe over your traditional solders. So again, I can use a lower flame with this, but I'm not going to, just out of convenience. So I'm going to actually dip these pieces. I have it over here. Okay, see it's nice and white and fluffy. I'm going to take that little solder. It's probably a bit much, but that's okay. So it's burning it off, and now it's flowing. Burning it off, and there it goes. So as you can see, this piece really isn't, it's relatively pretty clean. I used a pretty high flame for that. I tend to do it in my videos just because I'm being a little lazy and not switching my torch tip, but great for soldering, great for annealing. I think you pretty much get the gist.
So now also something I like about paste is that, I guess it's kind of like a comparison almost to paste for me because that's what I prefer to use, is that paste does dry up. You know, I'm really bad about keeping the cap on. I guess something very small. It's not really, it's more of a personal problem, and it definitely dries up, but to me I keep adding water and it's fine and it works just as well. One thing I don't really prefer with the MyTflux is that the charcoal gets very dirty. Let's say you use, hold on, let me get my charcoal block. So if you use charcoal a lot, which I love charcoal blocks, I use hard charcoal blocks to solder most of my stuff, depending on what it is. And I find that when you spray, if you have to do like a spraying application, this gets very, very dirty and gunked up, which I don't really like. So I've heard that these honeycomb blocks, which mine, the reason I don't really love these is because they break pretty easily, work well with the MyTflux because the holes kind of absorb that overspray and don't gunk it up as much. So I don't really like the honeycombs for anything else, and I really haven't tried it much, but I'll show it on camera, just an example. So definitely it gunks up charcoal if charcoal is something that you like to use and you want to use the MyTflux with.
So here's another piece of metal, and a lot of people said to protect kind of the charcoal blocks, you can use this honeycomb block because these little holes will kind of absorb the overspray or what have you. Problem is, as you can tell, this is busted up and broken, and this happened in multiple spots, and I just wasn't really a big fan of it. I wouldn't buy it again personally. Maybe it's really great for this particular use where a lot of the spray goes underneath and it doesn't get as gunked up. So let's say we were going to spray this particular little piece. God, there's something burning, I think, off of this. Cannot be healthy. So this is an observation that I can definitely tell you that spraying on this would probably be a better bet because it's going right through it. I never really cared for this honeycomb block. Something is smoking down there, and I don't know what it is. There has to be something in these little holes that's like burning off, but it definitely absorbs most of that product, and it doesn't probably ruin it as quickly. So maybe this honeycomb block serves its purpose for this and this alone for me. I don't know, maybe we can retry that. With these kind of products, there's a lot of testing to be done, and there's a lot of different ways you can use things. So everybody has a different method of doing stuff, and it's more or less a preference. But I never really was a huge fan of these for my everyday soldering. I love charcoal, but maybe it's something we'll explore in the near future.
Now they say that the MyTflux is very good for Argentinium silver solder. I know that Argentinium can be it can crack if too much heat is applied, so this is probably a really good protective barrier. I don't work with that silver, so I really couldn't give you my thoughts on that. Overall, I really like it for certain applications. If you're going to be, this is definitely a benefit, if you're going to be doing like a really big multiple solder piece, let's say you have a back plate and you have 4 bezels, you have recycled balls, maybe a beaded wire detail. I like to use it in conjunction with paste flux. I do mix it, and I find that it protects the metal really well, but my paste flux my paste flux will actually solder and flow it better. So I get to get the best of both worlds. Now I'm not sure if you're supposed to use them together, but I do my own concoction and it seems to work. And I get less of that fire stain on the bigger pieces where you have very small crevices that might be hard to polish out later. So it's definitely a great protective barrier. I do think it's worth having in your studio. If you don't have the budget for it, I'd say wait. It's not a necessity. Would I purchase it again? Absolutely. Could I live without it? Absolutely, but I don't want to. I really like having it in my studio. I don't think it's too expensive to have a bottle laying around for certain projects and applications. So yeah, I'm pretty satisfied overall. I really didn't like it very much when I first started using it. I will be honest. It took me a long time to kind of gravitate and continue to use it, and I will be inserting clips throughout the video that show me using it, and I hope that this helps. Maybe you'll try it, maybe you don't want to try it, but I hope that at some point this video gave you some information regarding the Tflux. And there's a lot of reviews, not a lot, but there's about 7 reviews on Rio Grande's website, and they're very mixed. Some people just love it, and some people just hate it. So I think you take it with a grain of salt, see for yourself, and let me know your comments below if there are other products that you'd like me to try out or review, and I would be happy to do so. So I'll see you guys soon. My next vlog will be coming up hopefully shortly, and I hope everybody's well. Bye.